Well, good evening and welcome to my ethical violations presentation. My name is Andrea Lee, and this evening I'll be discussing a real case where a counselor in Iowa had to give up their license due to ethical violations. I'm going to walk us through the details of the case, explain the ethical rules that were broken, and offer solutions for how we can avoid these kinds of mistakes in the future. So let's dive right in. First of all, in this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on a real life case. You can go to slide 2 that deals with an ethical violation by a licensed counselor. As an emerging professional and a future counselor myself, I believe it's important to understand how these situations can occur and how we as professionals can avoid them. It's really easy to feel like this could never happen to me, and it's humbling to read these articles and know that this was someone who started out just like I did, believing that they were going into a helping field, a career where they really wanted to help people, and then they've wound up here. And so rather than take this perspective of superiority, like that could never happen to me, like I actually want us to look at this and realize that this could happen to anyone should they find themselves violating some of the ACA Code of Ethics. So we'll be using the ACA Code of Ethics, which is a set of rules and guidelines for counselors to help explain what went wrong and how we can do better. Again, my name is Andrea. This is a not quite current picture of me. As you can see, I've had a haircut. I am an emerging professional, a future LPC, hoping to have a focus on crisis and trauma counseling somewhere within the mental health field. So we're going into slide 3. This case comes from Iowa, where this counselor was found guilty of violating professional ethics. This counselor engaged in sexual misconduct with a client, which is a serious violation of professional boundaries. And as a result, the counselor decided to voluntarily surrender his license. He gave up voluntarily his right to practice as a licensed counselor because of what happened. This case highlights the importance of maintaining ethical standards in our field. The article does go on to detail, unfortunately, 3 more instances in Iowa around this time of similar things happening. However, I'm really just focusing on the first violation that the article goes over. So our ethical dilemma here going into slide 4 is quite clear in this case. A counselor should never have a personal or a sexual relationship with a client. This is called a dual relationship, and it can harm the client and make it hard for the counselor to make a fair professional decision in regards to how they work with their client. So when the counselor in this case became sexually involved with their client, it crossed a serious boundary. Not only is it unethical, but it also takes advantage of the client's vulnerability, which is something that we're trained to protect against. Going into slide 5, the ethics code application. The American Counseling Association, the ACA, has a code of ethics that provides clear guidelines on what counselors should and should not do. So we're going to just break down for a second some of the rules that were violated here. A5A, avoiding harmful dual relationships. So this rule says that counselors should never get involved with their clients in a personal way, especially not sexually. A1A, primary responsibility is client welfare. The main job of a counselor is to protect and help the client, not exploit them. When the counselor violated this rule, they hurt the client's well-being. A1D, support network involvement. This part of the code says that counselors should work with a client's support system, like family or friends, to improve the client's therapy. This wasn't possible in this case because of the improper relationship. And then finally, A1B, accurate records and documentation. Counselors are expected to keep accurate records of what happens in therapy. This helps ensure accountability and protects the client. The counselor in this case likely failed to maintain proper records, especially regarding the unethical relationship. It can become a slippery slope really fast, and then he found himself doing things that he never should have been doing. And had he been actually documenting what the nature of his communication was with this client, there would have been red flags to supervisors or anyone who had the opportunity to go over these case notes far sooner than where they found themselves. So going on to slide 6, my analysis of why it's a violation. This case is a clear violation of several important ethical principles. Number 1, dual relationships. It creates a conflict of interest because the counselor is no longer seen as just a professional. They become personally involved, which can cloud judgment and decision making. They're no longer having strictly a professional relationship when it becomes dual. We cannot be friends with our clients. We cannot take that relationship outside of work, outside of the client professional skilled helper relationship, because it really does begin to cloud your judgment. Another ethical principle to note here is exploitation. Exploitation is when someone uses another person's vulnerability for their own benefit. So in this case, the counselor took advantage of the client's vulnerability, which is harmful and against ethical principles. Another thing to note here is boundaries and how critical they are in therapy. Counselors must maintain a clear line between personal and professional life to ensure the safety and the trust of the client. By crossing these boundaries, the counselor compromised the therapeutic relationship. And then finally, the counselor did not follow the rules and keep accurate records. Again, without proper documentation, it is difficult to hold professionals accountable, which can lead to harm for the client. If this counselor were doing the right thing, quote unquote, by documenting all of his communication with the client, again, this would have signaled like major warning signs, major red flags long before he was found out the way that he was. Moving on to slide 7, preventative solutions. So to prevent similar ethical violations in the future, counselors should undergo ethics training regularly. Staying up to date on ethics training is so important, especially focusing on the importance of maintaining boundaries and understanding the dangers of dual relationships. These simply cannot happen in this field. Another important solution here is supervision. Counselors should have regular check-ins with experienced supervisors who can offer guidance on tough cases. This helps counselors to stay objective and ethical. Additionally, there should be clear policies in place for reporting any ethical concerns and violations. I wonder how long this went on before anyone, any colleague, any supervisor had any sense that perhaps something was going on that shouldn't have been. So when you have clear policies in place for reporting things, then if you get that feeling that something is off as a colleague or a supervisor, you can go take the proper measures to begin the reporting process as soon as possible, as soon as you are seeing something that should not be happening. So when you have these policies in place, it ensures that when something goes wrong, it's dealt with immediately and appropriately, like we're not dragging this out. Finally, counselors should be educated on the importance of proper documentation. So keeping detailed and accurate records protects both the counselor and the client, ensuring transparency and accountability. Again, if he had been keeping accurate records and someone had been following up on those records who needed to be, then this could have been prevented long before it got to the point that it did. Moving on to slide 8, our training and education recommendations. There's several ways to ensure that counselors stay on track and avoid making these ethical mistakes. Counselors should participate in continuous ethics education, staying up to date and current with what is being put out surrounding ethics in the helping field. This could include attending workshops or earning continuing education credits that specifically address the issues of dual relationships and professional boundaries. It would be helpful to have a formal ethical decision-making model that counselors can use to navigate difficult situations. These difficult situations are going to come up. The temptation to move a relationship beyond where it should be could be present for anyone. Like, we can't think that we're above it, or that temptation or that situation could never present itself to us. However, having a formal ethical decision-making model would be extremely helpful. This model would help guide counselors in making ethical choices when they're feeling unsure of the right path. Self-care is also so important. Counselors should have programs to help them manage stress and prevent burnout, which can lead to poor judgment and boundary violations. Just seeing how this counselor immediately surrendered voluntarily his license probably shows that long before he began this dual relationship that led to unethical practices with this client, he was probably feeling burned out, wasn't coping with stress well. And so when this opportunity presented itself, his guard was way down. Finally, we need to create a supportive professional community where counselors feel comfortable discussing difficult cases or ethical dilemmas. This helps counselors to feel supported and less isolated in their work, which can be very difficult, mentally taxing, and feel isolating. In conclusion, this case, moving on to slide 9, shows us how serious ethical violations can be, both for the client involved and the counselor's career. By following the ACA Code of Ethics, we can ensure that we provide the best care to our clients while protecting our professional integrity. Ethics training, supervision, and clear policies are key to preventing future violations like this one. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I have my references in slide 10 that I used for this presentation. The first source is the article from the Iowa Capitol Dispatch about the counselor's case, and the second is the ACA Code of Ethics itself, which provides guidelines for ethical practice in counseling. Both are important resources for understanding both the situation that happened and the ethical standards in our field. Again, thank you for attending this presentation. I appreciate it and hope that you may have gleaned something from it. I would be interested in hearing any feedback or questions that you may have. Thank you and have a great night.